Welcome to the TryPod, where we break down the NRL every game, every week from a punting perspective. I'm Jacob Wynn, he's the Padonis. Tonight we're going to preview round 20. We've won 7 best bets in a row. Last week we went 4-0, round 19. We did get very lucky with that very final best bet, as we covered in the recap. We've had it all this year. We've certainly struggled through periods of the season, and we've talked about how you've got to remain selective when you're losing. The truth is, even when you're winning, you want to remain selective. We never have a feeling of like, oh, we're hot, we can pick any game. In saying that, we have put our heads together and come up with best bets in 5 matches. So 5 best bets. Let's just share them straight off the top. The first one's going to be the New Zealand Warriors, who host Melbourne Storm. We're taking plus 6.5 in the first half. $1.88 on Ladbrokes and Neds. Adonis, welcome. Why do you like it?
Hey, Winnie, great to be here again for round 20. Yeah, look, the Warriors, to me, they get to play their second game now at Mount Smart in front of what's going to be another sellout. And these home games for the rest of the year for them, I really feel that it's going to be an intimidating place for opposition teams to go to. And this week's going to be no different. And given the Storm struggles, I think that the fans are going to be buoyed by that. And they're genuinely going to believe they have a chance of winning the game and keeping it close. And I do think that the Warriors can put some pressure on them at times. And the first half's the best way to attack that, given that they should start well and be buoyed by that crowd.
I do think Warriors have a forward pack that's a strength that can match with Melbourne, and the Storm backline just at this point in the season does not scare you. If the Warriors are going to hang in this game, I think they've got to start strong, and that's a good first half line. Next one is Friday. Also, we're playing the Eels. We're going to go mechanical plus 10.5. So how you do the mechanical bet, 90% of your stake is just plus 9.5, which is $2 on Ladbrokes and Neds. The other 10% of your stake, put that on Panthers to win by exactly 10, which is paying $19 on Sportsbet. Again, you can listen to this show or watch it. If you're watching, you get the benefit of the graphic. It might help you, but we're always here to help. Ask us in the comments or reach out if you need any additional advice about a mechanical. But basically, it achieves Eels plus 10.5 at $1.80. Why are we with Parramatta, Padonis?
Yeah, so we've chosen to bet against Penrith pretty sparingly this season because we just know how good they are. But I feel this is a great spot to take the Eels, and I like them to stay competitive here. And Penrith have pretty much all but wrapped up the minor premiership now, and they're going to have to travel to Bankwest to face what will be a fired-up Eels team. And they are under strength, missing Crichton and Jerome Luai, which can't be understated how big those guys are for what they do. And I definitely feel that Eels have played them tight recently, and they do know that they can put some pressure on this Panthers side, and they can get at them, and they've got more to play for, I feel, than the Panthers. So we don't need them to win. We just need them to stay close.
Now, Penrith lost once this whole season. It was to Parramatta, so no doubt they're going to come in and having Parramatta's full attention. But in saying that, it also shows that Parramatta's not afraid of Penrith and can mix it with them. And Para are pretty much close to full strength, while Penrith have got those key outs. It's a big game, I'd say, for both clubs. They'll both be really highly motivated, but you're catching a double-digit line at home. We're going to do it with Parramatta, even though they've been in some spotty form. On Saturday, we've got a bit of a different one. We're going either team 1-11 in Rabbitohs Sharks, but we will also win if the Rabbitohs win by 12. So that's paying $1.80, a same game multi, again, on the screen. It's basically like either team 1-12, although we wouldn't win if the Sharks won by exactly 12. So it's not quite as good as either team 1-12. It's better than either team 1-10. And we reckon this has got a tight game written all over it. We slightly lean to the Rabbitohs, who are the underdog. They're about a plus 2.5, plus 3.5 underdog in this, but they're probably just about the hottest side in the NRL right now off the back of Latrell Mitchell, since they got their origin players back in the mix as well. And the Sharkies, you can't really fault their form either, and they pushed the Premiers all the way last week. Missing Finucane, I think, narrows the gap between these sides as well. In fact, I'm not even sure who is the better team, but you might give an edge to the Sharkies playing at Shark Park. But regardless, it's a massive game for both sides. Rabbitohs just 2 points outside the top 4. Hard for me to see either team winning this by double digits. I reckon it'll be tight and go right down to the wire. And maybe a superstar like Latrell is the difference. We'll see. We won't actually have to worry about who wins with the way we're playing that one. Later on Saturday night, Brisbane minus 15.5. Pick your own line. $1.81 on Sportsbet is the best way to play that, we believe, as they host the Tigers. Padonis.
Tigers, as we all know, copped an absolute brutal loss last week, putting in so much effort against the Cowboys, coming up short somewhat controversially. And I do feel that that's going to have a negative impact on them this week. And we do know Brisbane get an extended turnaround, and we know how good they can be against these sides getting out into a lead. And I do feel like they can't be complacent given that top 4 logjam is real, and Brisbane just have too much firepower for the Tigers, who might be thinking about last week, I think.
Yeah, it's hard to get over that one. And I will talk a bit more about what's come out of that crazy ending. Funny to think that's not the biggest story in rugby league this week, however. But I think it's a brilliant spot for the Broncos. You get a win without your Origin players. Then you go and get an underdog win in Sydney. And now you get to come home and you're off the Thursday game last week. So you get a long prep and you play a side that's off a Sunday game, off a short prep. That's a second consecutive week on the road that had a heartbreaking defeat. And the Tigers might say they want to bottle up that effort and reproduce it against Brisbane. It's not going to be that easy. It's not how it works for these bottom 4 sides. Meanwhile, Brisbane's just playing with so much confidence and energy, and they do not mind running the score up on sides, as we've seen multiple times this season, and especially in front of their home fans. I think Brisbane should have a pretty comfortable win here. So we're willing to, this line's maybe 17.5. We're getting through the 16, but I also think by game day, the line could be above 18 as well. So that's a great value line to get on Brisbane. Not often that we're playing these large lines. Finally, Cowboys minus 3.5 in the second half, $1.85 on Ladbrokes and Net. So Cowboys second half, why not? It worked for us last week, albeit only just. We talk about how they have that fitness edge. We believe it's a real thing over sides. Look, they did come back last week when they faced a double-digit deficit. I think the fact that they got that lucky win means that they will not be complacent whatsoever, because they've been handed such a valuable 2 points that puts them in the box seat to finish not just top 4 but top 2 this season, and the importance of that can't be understated. And they're just going to be too good for St George. They may even have Ruben Cotter bolstering them as well. So although they're on the road and although St George still in the finals hunt, we'd tend to think that the Cowboys, if not over the whole 80 minutes, certainly in the second 40, will separate there. Let's jump straight into, I feel like we've got so much to cover tonight's show, but let's jump straight into a market update from Tristan, who I think is joining us from the golf course.
G'day TryPod family, it's Tristan here from Top Sport. We've got a big week of NRL. There's obviously been plenty happening off the field over the last few days, and that's seen a massive shift in the market for the Manly game. We actually opened that game at 2.5. Manly underdogs at that 2.5. Obviously a huge game on paper between them and the Roosters, both of them sitting right on the verge of the 8. And then obviously everything that's happened over the last few days has seen a massive move. The line's out to 18.5 now, and it'll be interesting where that finishes, because obviously there's a lot of other factors that are going to go into pricing this one now. So that's been obviously the biggest move, not necessarily through weight of money. The one that has seen the move through weight of money has been the Broncos Tigers game. That game's moved by 3 points. Obviously the Tigers had a heartbreaking loss last weekend. The Broncos are really good against the Eels, so punters are expecting the Broncos to be way too strong in that game. The other one that looks a really good game on paper is the Panthers and the Eels, where obviously now no Jerome Luai, no Stephen Crichton, so Penrith a little bit down on troops. The Eels have performed very, very well against the top sides, Penrith and Storm, over the last couple of years, and they've lost some key games. They seem to have a pretty good bounce back factor in them, so there has been a push from 10.5 into 9.5. So we'll wait and see where that one finishes up now. But lots of intrigue over the weekend. Hopefully the focus is on the footy this weekend as opposed to some of the other things. So good luck if you're having a punt, and we'll speak to you on the weekend.
Thank you, Tristan. Now, speaking of a heartbreaking defeat, he told me he wanted to nominate himself for bad beat of the week because TopSpet took a massive bet from a punter that had a multi of 2 teams head-to-head on Sunday. That was the North Queensland Cowboys and the Collingwood Magpies. And if you saw how either of those games ended, I'm sure all NRL fans saw how the Cowboys game ended by now. But in the AFL as well, Collingwood kicked the winning goal after the siren. And this punter needed both of those events to go their way to cash a big-time ticket against Toppy. Okay, I want to talk about the Manly and Roosters saga. From a betting context, there's obviously been talked ad nauseum across the week. You can get all the news and opinion you want. But you rewind just a week ago, Manly were winners of 4 of 5. They had got revenge. They had beaten the Storm. The only loss in their previous 5 games was a game they blew a 14-point lead to the Cowboys. So arguably they should have won 5 in a row and had matched it with a lot of strong competition. Without Tom Trbojevic, they scored 44, 30, 26, 36, and 42. They were clicking. They were in as good a form as just about anyone in the competition. News came out that Tom Trbojevic sensationally might return. Now you're thinking not only can they surge to the finals, they can get him back and still contend. And what has happened in the last few days for the Manly Sea Eagles? You lose to the Dragons as a favourite. We got Jersey Gate on Monday, on the eve of a short week where you're playing Thursday. And this obviously hit everyone by surprise. And this is 8th versus 9th, a match with major implications for who will make the finals. And the outcome of it all is a 16-point line swing in your opponent's favour, as Tristan said. So as it stands, Manly hosts the Roosters at 4 Pines Park, and the Roosters are 18.5-point favourites with Tuipulotu, Olukwatu, Saab, Aloiai, Schuster, Sipley, Kohler not playing. Jake Trbojevic, Andrew Davey, Lockie Croker are all back from COVID. And then, of course, there's some new faces that come in from the reserves, and including James Seguiaro, an NRL return off the bench. The Roosters had no injuries last week, which is a relief for them. And in fact, they're bolstered by the return of Joey Manu and Lindsay Collins from injury. Padonis, you have a lean in this game, given everything that's transpired?
It's pretty hard to make a case for Manly if you do like them. But the question you have to ask yourself is that this line, as Tristan touched on, was sitting at 2.5. It's moved 16 points. We all know the reasons why and why Manly are so heavily depleted. But I think it's more than just the players on the team sheet, because I do have to question the mentality of Manly, how the preparation was this week, and how that impact's going to have on a few of the other players in that side. Because not only are they fighting for that top 8 spot, as you touched on, but is this going to derail their season? And will all the other players be completely focused and committed to the cause? Maybe they feel like they've been let down by some of their teammates. I'm not too sure. I know that Des Hasler and Chev Aarons came out in their press conference and said that the side's still galvanised. We're still going to put in a great effort to try and win, because it is such a big game on paper with both sides, Manly and Roosters, locked on the same amount of points. But it's just hard to have the faith in Manly given what's happened this week. And I do know that the Roosters are at full strength now, and they are coming into some great form as well. We liked them the last few weeks. We were on them against the Dragons. We were on them against the Knights. So we do like how this Roosters side is building. And I think Keary slotted in seamlessly last week, and he looks better than what I thought he was going to. I thought he'd take a few weeks to get up to speed, but he looks great. And I can only see one winner in this game, but the line is pretty high, and it's a bit high for me. If it was under 14, I'd definitely lay with the Roosters, but I just can't have the confidence to lay 3 converted tries when Manly do still have their best spine that they can roll out, knowing that Lachlan Croker's back as well, because he missed last week due to COVID. They've still got Garrick and Foran and Evans there, so they can keep it competitive, but just not too sure about their mental state.
Now, one thing I do wonder about the Roosters, with Trent Robinson openly saying a couple of weeks ago he would have rested Teddy after Origin 3 if not for their position in the standings. Now you find yourself unexpectedly an 18-point favourite. You can argue that you're playing with fire if you say, hey, let's actually rest Teddy now. But on the other side of things, like, you're getting back Manu, you could slot him straight to fullback. If you believe it's important to give, your best player a rest before the finals, it actually is smart in some ways to do it in the game you're the highest probability to win without him. That's like one minor concern I would have with playing the Roosters, and then you found out someone like Teddy was going to sit out, and that would see the line go back in the opposite direction a little bit. But I can't overstate the fact, and this is one thing that I haven't heard discussed this week around this whole story, is that this has ended up as an absolute gift to the Roosters at this point in the season. Just how lucky they are, how important this game is, an 8th versus 9th, and they are nearly getting handed, 2 competition points. Obviously, we'll see. And as you say, Manly's still at home, still has some key position players available. And the other thing is, no matter what happens, and we can talk more about it in the recap, we'll never know. Would the Roosters have won this game anyway if they were both at full strength? I think based on their form and the players available, I would have sided with Roosters, in those circumstances. But it's just going to be interesting. I think I'm going into this game with so many questions. Like, if the Roosters do win, are they going to win by a bigger margin than they would have? And then how does that affect the ladder? And will Manly be able to recover, as you say? And inadvertently, does it cost somebody else a spot in the finals? Because the Raiders are in the hunt. And does the plus minus make a difference, or does the extra 2 points going one way or the other push someone in or out? Maybe Canberra sneaks in over Manly and they look back to this game. So I come back to like the ripple effects of this week is what's got me wondering the most. And I could only play Roosters, but as you say, the line has moved so far now, and maybe Manly comes out inspired. But with all the disruption being a short week and the way that the Roosters are travelling, I can't play Manly either. So it's just one to sit back and see what happens. We are going to play New Zealand at Mount Smart on Friday, plus 6.5 in the first half, $1.88, as you know. But the full line is minus 13.5. New Zealand has picked Walsh at fullback. Harris DeVito reverts to 5'8". The Storm have an unchanged 13 after a fourth consecutive defeat. But honest, last time these sides met, Melbourne scored 70 points, including 10-0 in the second half. But you think it could be a bit different this week?
I definitely do feel that it's going to be a different contest. And I think common sense has prevailed from Stacey Jones by picking Walsh at the back because he's their most dynamic player, and Harris DeVito partnering Johnson is their best halves combo. And it's pretty poetic that these two sides are meeting, especially when the Storm are looking for players, and Reece Walsh was one of those players that was touted as potentially going to the Storm on loan to finish the season. So if he still has some aspirations of playing finals, maybe he'll want to have a big game here to try to convince the Storm to get something over the line. But I definitely feel that, as we touched on at the top, with this home crowd, which is going to be another sellout, it's their second home game in 4 years, they're going to be able to push the Storm at least early on. And you touched on the fact that these two sides did play in the Anzac Day clash, and the line was at 17.5 at that point. But when I look at that Melbourne side, they had Pappenhausen at fullback, they had Remus Smith, Xavier Coates in their back line, and they also had Brandon Smith as well on the interchange. None of those players are there today, and I don't feel the line has come down far enough. So maybe the Warriors are still being a little bit disrespected, or maybe the market feels that the Storm are still elite, like they were in past months and years. But I definitely feel that with the Storm coming off 4 consecutive losses, and of a 6-day turnaround, it's going to take more than 1 week to turn this ship around for the Storm. So I think at this point, they're just going to be happy just to get the 2 points. So I don't feel that they are going to extend the game and try to bury the Warriors, but I do see the Warriors being competitive, and they have a forward pack. They can match it with the Storm struggles of late. So we do like the tight first half, and after a record defeat, as he touched on, losing 70-10, that I can definitely see the players putting in a big effort to try to reverse that.
I think you make a good point there that a Storm of old, if they were off 1 loss, they're going to take out their frustrations on the team the next week. And Bellamy wasn't satisfied with just winning, how dominant this side was. They had to bury sides. This is different. You feel like a good result for them is travelling across the Tasman and coming home with 2 points, to be honest. And they're certainly not getting ahead of themselves and thinking that they're going to destroy the opposition. They'll just be happy to get back in the winner's circle. Now, speaking of replacement players, the news come out today, David Nofaluma is going to join this side on loan. People should understand that's not going to be happening this week, but he will be there for the remainder of the season, which allows them to slot him in and keep Meaney at fullback. Whether they got one more up their sleeve or whether they're still trying to target Walsh, I hope not, because we've tipped a couple of other sides to maybe make a grand final run, and I actually like the fact that maybe that Melbourne aren't as big of a threat this season. But we'll see. With the Warriors, the other good thing is they played 2 good first halves the last couple of weeks, really, against Parramatta. And then even more so last week, they were up 14-0 at halftime against Canberra before they got run over in those games. Now, does that mean that New Zealand ran out of steam, or were those just solid opponents that clicked into gear? It might be a bit of both. And speaking of opponents, I think it is worth mentioning, in the last month, the big story is how the Storm has fallen apart and everything. And look, we've done pretty well. We haven't bet on Melbourne any of the last 4 games that they lost. In fact, we profited going against them last week. But in their defence, they lost to Manly. I just spoke about how Manly was in really good form a month ago. They lost to the Sharks in a game no Origin players took part. They lost to the Raiders in a game where they threw an intercept try, but also they lost Pappenhausen in the first half. And they just lost to Souths, who are one of the form teams in the comp. So I'm also wondering, at what point does the public overreact to their struggles, and at what point do the Storm present value? And I was wondering if it was going to be this week, but I was surprised to see the line is still as high as it is. So maybe New Zealand puts in a good performance and pushes them all the way, and then maybe the best opportunity to play Melbourne is going to be in a coming week or 2, especially once they get back Brandon Smith. I know we've said this before, but they're just such a different side in attack without Pappenhausen. They've got to reinvent the way they're going to attack on the fly. And then Cheese imposes his will in games in the middle of the field, in attack and in defence, and they really miss that. And that's a good thing for our bet that he's not going to be part of this, and why I talk about the Warriors forwards, I think really being able to match it with Melbourne. And of course, if we play second half, we're not even worried if Melbourne do get back in a groove and if they do, extend the game later. But I also think it's worth questioning, and I don't think this is the case, but I did talk about this last week, a side that's contended for years on end. And at this point now, do the players start to second guess whether they are true contenders? You've got several veterans in the team who know they're leaving. I think it's fair at least to pose the question whether this side is going to have enough determination to actually pull themselves back into contention, or if it is just not going to be Melbourne's year. So we're siding with the Warriors. Don't necessarily have to win the game, but certainly keep it close in the first half. Final thoughts on this game and tips as well for the whole round we're going to get from the Yaks.
G'day everyone. Round 20, how fast is this going? 7 out of 8 last week. Nearly there. Seagulls versus the Roosters. The first game. Very disappointing Manly last week, so I'm going the Roosters. They should be too strong. The Warriors versus the Storm. I don't think it'll be too much in this game. Storm aren't the team they used to be, but I'm going the Storm. Eels versus the Panthers. Penrith got knocked off by the Eels in round 9, but that won't happen again. Penrith. Titans versus the Raiders. Got more to play for. Canberra, so I'm going Canberra. Sharks versus the Rabbitohs, probably the match of the round here. I'm going to go South in a close one. Broncos versus the Tigers. I think Brisbane will make it 4 on the trot. Knights versus the Bulldogs, disappointing Newcastle. And the Doggies actually aren't playing too bad. So I think the Bulldogs. Dragons versus the Cowboys. This will be another good game. They got a bit of a wake-up call last week, the Cowboys against the Tigers. Well, what about that? Controversial decision there at the end of the game, but I'm going to go the Cowboys. So I'm going Roosters, Storm, Panthers, Raiders, Rabbitohs, Broncos, Bulldogs, and Cowboys. Good luck.
Thanks, Gilly. And one more legend is actually going to weigh in on the Storm Warriors game as well. Robbie Farah, who hasn't shared his thoughts with us for a few weeks. Let's see what he's got.
Hey, Dabblers. Robbie Farah back again with my Roughie the Round. It's been a few weeks since we've had a crack, so hopefully we can get a good one this week. I've had a look at the draw, a bit of value there this weekend. I really like the Warriors taking on the Storm back at Mount Smart this weekend. They were great. They played there last time against us, and the Storm have been struggling. Obviously lost 4 in a row, and I think they're in a bit of a rut, the Storm. I think it might take a bit for them to get out of this rut they're in. So the Warriors at home, really good value. I think they're around $4. So get on the Warriors, either to win head-to-head or definitely with the line. Get on banter, have a crack, have some fun with your mates, copy some bets, and all the best.
Thanks, Robbie. How about that? He's with us as well with his upset of the week. And maybe Warriors can pull the upset as well. We talk about how much the Storm is struggling. You follow Robbie Farrow, follow Gilly and ourselves and many other of the TryPod community. And if you want a Dabble account, use the code TryPod. Let's move to the Battle of the West. Eels, Panthers, and Panthers are -9.5. Our best bet, we're taking Mechanical Para plus 10.5. Parramatta have not made any changes after a humbling defeat at the hands of Brisbane, at least not any major changes. Might be a bench reshuffle, one forward, I think. Penrith finally got a key injury. Jerome Luai is reportedly out for up to 2 months, which brings O'Sullivan into 5/8, and then Crichton has to let that nasty ear injury heal, and his spot's taken by Rob Jennings. So Penrith sitting 8 points clear at the top of the ladder, which is crazy. As I said before, have just one loss from their 18 games, but it was against Parramatta. And as I said before, Penrith definitely will be pretty motivated to come in and put up a good performance, but we're comfortable that Parramatta can mix it with them, to be honest.
Yeah, that's for sure. And the Eels have played their best footy against the best teams this year. But last week was a bit of a disappointing result for them. It was pretty demoralising against the Broncos, I'd feel, losing by that scoreline against a fellow top 4 side. So the one risk with taking the Eels is, whilst it was uncharacteristic, is that going to have more of a long-term effect on this side's mentality? And will they be able to get back up for this sort of contest? And a lot of people are questioning the Eels this year as a genuine side, but I definitely still have the faith and confidence that the Eels can be there or thereabouts come September. So I do think that they will turn this around, especially with an extended turnaround coming off a Thursday night game. And it's pretty much must-win territory for them in terms of top 4 position, given that they're in 7th and that logjam. They can't afford to slip 2 games behind with so little games left. And we touched on they are a bit stronger as well with Bryce Cartwright on the bench, because I don't feel like Jacob Arthur offered much because he only played 6 minutes last week, and I don't think he can cover as many positions. At least Bryce Cartwright, for all the ups and downs he's had in his career, at least he provides some X factor at this stage. And when I look at the Penrith side, they've swapped out Mitch Kenny and brought in Charlie Staines on the bench. And I'd question that as well, because not sure what value he'd have barring an injury. So Penrith are pretty much coming into this game. Not only are they undermanned with Crichton and Luai, as you touched on, but they're also essentially playing with a 16-man rotation with Staines there. So I definitely feel like the Eels are going to showcase a much better version than what they did last week. And they have played Penrith pretty tight over the last 2 games. They did beat Penrith over at Bluebet Stadium earlier this year as their only defeat, as you touched on. And they did push them all the way in last year's semi-final. And there was some doubts around that as well and some controversy, and they could have easily won that too. So we don't need the Eels to win, and I'll be surprised if they won, to be honest. I do think Penrith will still be too strong, but for the Eels to stay within 1 to 10 points, I think it's a pretty good number, and the Eels are going to be there or thereabouts on Friday night, pushing them all the way.
And I was going to say, in fact, next best way to play our best bet is also to play either team 1 to 12, which in fact you'd win even if Penrith wins by 12, where our best bet will lose. But you'd lose if Para wins 13 plus. Unlikely, but we've been burned one too many times before when we've picked the upset this season, and then the upsetting team has upset us by winning by too many points. And not that we're expecting that, but we're protected from that. And Parramatta are not protected from falling out of the 8. Let's make that clear. They are 2 wins ahead of the 4-team logjam. But I've got in the lab and I've looked at the ladder predicted a lot this week, and Parramatta, for one, does not have a strong points differential. So you imagine that if they lose this week, which is most likely still, and if they don't show up, and if Penrith has their way with them, suddenly they're going to be just 1 win ahead of some other sides trying to get the top 8, and with even worse plus minus. And I really think Para are going to need to win probably 2 at least, if not 3 more times this season to make the finals. And I look at their draw, and they may only be favourites once or twice more this season. They've got a tough run home. So they legitimately could miss the 8 despite having such a strong start and having some signature wins this season. Now, what they've got going for them in this one and why we like them is they do come in the healthier team. And that's about the first time you could say this season, referring to a Penrith opponent. We also discussed the recent history, which I think means that Para are not afraid of Penrith and can take it to them. I do also think it's interesting, the 2 players that are out, Luai and Crichton. These are 2 players that both copped a bit of criticism after the Origin series. I've heard both those players being referred to by people as overrated, and people saying, like Luai, Crichton, they wouldn't be in the Blues if they're not Panthers. So if you're one of the people who feels that way, maybe you want to back Penrith this week, because if you don't really think those players are that great and they just look better because they're playing, in that for the Mountain Men, then maybe you would think Penrith won't miss them that much. We're not really in that camp. I think that their attack will suffer without the threat, on the left and on the right. And I do think it's an opportunity for Parramatta to fight fire with fire in the forwards and then focus a bit more attention on trying to stop Nathan Cleary, and then hoping that their big game players in their spine can come up with a clutch moment or 2 and execute. I'll tell you my biggest hesitation, although we're still going to play Parramatta. My biggest hesitation is, do we overrate Parramatta? I feel like it's funny because the last 3 weeks we haven't been on Para, so it's not like we're blindly, overrating them, backing them every week. But the last 3 weeks against the Tigers, the Warriors, the Broncos, they haven't covered any of those lines, and I've expected them to do a bit better. So they're not meeting anyone's expectations, but here we are again. We expect them to do a bit better this week. Hopefully they'll pull through. On Saturday, the Titans host the Raiders. The line is -7.5 with the visitors favoured. look at that. I reckon Holbrook has been watching the show. He has swapped Tino to prop and Aaron Clark to start at lock. He's got Campbell on the bench again. Raiders have the same 17 that came back from 14-0 down against New Zealand last week at halftime. Jamal Fogarty faces his old club. Padonis, a lean or a like in this game?
Yeah, I would lean the Raiders if I had to choose, because I do think that they're taking all the momentum into this contest off the back of what was a pretty stellar comeback against the Warriors. And the Titans were disappointing again last week against the Bulldogs. And it's just pretty hard to trust them at this stage of the season to turn up with nothing to play for other than pride. But they do have some pretty good attacking plays in their lineup on their day, and they can be a plucky side when they get it all right. But I don't like the fact that Jaden Campbell's still on the bench, and we're now in round 20, and I don't think Holbrook really knows his best lineup still, and we're this deep into the season. So you do have to worry from that point of view how efficient that they will be. Ultimately, I think Canberra are just playing too well at the moment, and there's a pretty good energy in their squad. Ricky Stewart and the boys are up and about, and I just think they're going to be too much for the Titans. And when I look back to the first meeting these two guys had, the Titans led a 22-point nil lead slip against Canberra. So I think Ricky Stewart's going to use that as a bit of motivation to get his players to start the game right this time as well. And with the game coming up next week, if you look at the draw, they're playing Penrith next week at home. So if you imagine that that's already going to be penciled in as a loss, then I think this is almost must win for Canberra, because they can't afford to lose 2 in a row, because I think that'll kill the top 8 for them. So I would lean them, but not sure how much value we're getting, because I don't think the line should be this high. Probably paying a premium for the Titans' struggles.
That's right, because there's not many punters out there that want to back the Titans, and I've certainly bagged them a fair share of times this season, and I'll bag them a little bit more right now, because this week I saw a stat from NRL Physio. He listed all clubs in the NRL in order of major injuries, defined by players who got an injury that put them out for 5 weeks or more. So at the top, teams you'd expect that have had the most injuries: Melbourne, Roosters, Knights, Rabbitohs are up there. Which club you reckon has the least injuries? Penrith Panthers, right?
Yep.
No, it's the Gold Coast Titans have less injuries than even the Panthers. And you think about how, if not for that bunker decision that cost the Tigers would be last right now. And don't forget how they won that game against the Tigers, where the ball hit the bar, and they won a golden point game against the Dragons. So you hear the injury stat, and it makes how bad they've been this season even worse. It's actually diabolical. Now, having said all that, I look at their lineup this week, and I don't mind the mix. I know you said it's a bit funny having Campbell on the bench, but when he comes on, he plays fullback, and maybe Brimo switches to the halves. Boyd has done okay. I actually like Booth at 9, and I've said before I like Clark at lock. And in terms of availability of other key players, they're pretty much all available. So I know we've said it a few times, but I'll say it again. These dead teams, they're more likely to come out with a good game at home, which the Titans are at home for this one. And as for Canberra, I take your point. I think you're right. They're sitting in that 4-way tie from 8th to 10th on 20 points, or 8th to 11th it is. But they don't have a strong plus-minus. But what Canberra has in their favour more than any of those other sides is they've got the best draw remaining. So their destiny is in their hands. I think 28 points might get into the finals. It might not be enough for Canberra because of the weak differential. 30 definitely makes it. And 30 would be 5 more wins for Canberra. And I look at their draw, and I do see Canberra being favoured 5 of their final 6 games. So it's up to them, but they've got to make sure they don't slip up against some of these lesser teams. And last week was a bit of a warning shot, because they fell down early against New Zealand, but they recovered and they got that win. And you made that point that when the Raiders hosted the Titans, they let them get out to a big lead, but they did recover from that too. I think you combine both of those, and you're right that Canberra will come into the Gold Coast with their full attention. Looking at the matchup though, in terms of individuals, I just don't see how Canberra are that much better. But I think it's because the Titans are just not as good as the sum of their parts, and the Raiders are, as you say, like the tougher side, the better coach side, more resilient, and a little bit more ruthless when things are going their way. That's why I know Canberra should be favoured, but I don't see kind of any value on them. I could definitely see this one surprising people and being tight. And I also think the next game will be tight. It shouldn't be a surprise to that many. Sharks, Rabbitohs, two form sides of the competition, I reckon it's fair to say. The Rabbitohs will be 2.5-point underdogs at the Prison. The Sharkies have Finucane suspended, and you shared your thoughts on that in the recap, and I pretty much agreed with what you said about it, that it was a bit reckless, even if it was an accidental head clash. Nichols is injured for Souths. Sharks have been on this nice roll, winning games against strong opponents, exceeding expectations, and even last week, pushing Penrith to the wire. As we said, that game was 14-10 with 3 minutes to go. They easily covered the line. But Souths have probably impressed me as much, if not more. And we're going, as we said, our best bet, that same game multi on Sportsbet, where you take Rabbitohs plus 11.5 in the pick your own line, and then you take the Sharks plus 12.5 in the 12.5 section. Additional thoughts or factors for this one, Adonis?
Yeah, Souths are rocking up the ladder right now, aren't they? And playing some pretty good footy themselves. But I think the issue at the moment is that everyone's starting to see how good Souths are becoming, and maybe the market is catching up to them at the moment. Because don't forget as well, this is a side still missing Campbell Graham in their backline, and Mark Nichols did pick up an injury, as you touched on. I don't think their depth is as good in the forward rotation as some of the other sides around them. But I do think that Souths are a side that's going to get better later into the season as we hit into September with more upside, because the reps are only going to improve between Ilias, Latrell Mitchell, and Walker, because they haven't played many games together this year. But right now, in round 20, I think that Cronulla are the rightful favourite. And I do like the balance that they present in their side. And they are going to cause more problems for South than what they've experienced in the last few weeks in this run that they've had. Because the Sharkies themselves, though, they also beat up on an undermanned Storm and Cowboy side. And then they faced a Penrith side that were below their best last week, you'd say. So South are also going to be a different proposition for them as well. So it's two sides where if they're playing other teams, you might want to fade them. But I definitely feel that it's pretty much a coin flip game, and the bookies have got the market spot on. So I love the fact that we can get either team to keep the game close in that 1-11 market, and we even win, as you touched on the Sharks, if they do lose by 12. I would lean overs as well in this game for people out there who like to play totals, because I definitely feel that both attacks are probably, both defenses are a little bit maybe overrated at this point in the season, but it's going to be a great game and final style intensity, and I wouldn't be surprised if we get either side winning this one. So definitely like our angle.
Yeah, anytime we play an either team kind of market, then we're always slightly leaning to the underdog, who are the Rabbitohs. And they had a comprehensive win over Melbourne where the final score probably didn't even indicate how dominant they were. Look, the NRL is a league that's got many superstars, but I don't think anybody is playing at a higher level than Trell Met right now. And this is going to be such a competitive clash. Let's not forget, too, that Sharkies absolutely want to sustain that position in the top four, that it's there for them to hold on to at this point. But I don't know if everyone realises how the Rabbitohs have just snuck up and are just one win behind not only Cronulla but Brisbane as well, outside the top four. And if they win this game, they definitely can get into the top four and really give the competition a shake, I believe. On the other hand, Sharkies at Shark Park, and they're in good form too. You don't really want to oppose them. And I also think this will be, as you say, the Rabbitohs' toughest match probably since Latrell has returned. I reckon it's a one-score game in my opinion. So getting either team by 1-11 or 1-12 feels pretty strong to me. If I have to pick the winner, people always ask me, yeah, but who you reckon would win for the people in their tipping comps these days? I'll ride the super duper star, whether it's a play that he comes up with or just one extra kick, because I think Latrell Mitchell's kicking a bit better this season too. He might land one more than Nico Hines, who can be a little more inconsistent. If I have to split the difference, and I think it could be that close, I can't wait to watch that one. And then the final game Saturday night, I don't think will be close, and it's Brisbane hosting West Tigers. Line is 17.5, and we've played minus 15.5 at $1.81 on Sportsbet as our best bet. I want to say a couple more things about the Tigers. Cowboys saga, remember that one? The previous drama in the NRL? It's never a dull moment, right? Isn't it crazy? We all lost our minds over that. And then within 24 hours, it was almost an afterthought. It's one of the worst bunker decisions I've seen this year, if not the worst. And we both openly admitted that in the recap, despite the fact it won us a best bet. Our best bet is a loss, if not for that decision and then the 2 points that the Cowboys got. That's just the truth of the matter. But the thing is, when the bunker comes up with like a terrible decision, I don't know, like if it happens during a game, you can still argue, oh yeah, but nobody knows, what would have happened afterwards. You can't say it cost the team a game because, the game still went on. It's kind of like a butterfly effect argument, right? But when the decision is made on full time and it gives the team that's down 1 a chance to get 2 points, which they take, you can actually say that decision decided the match. So I do certainly feel for the Tigers, in terms of that. And who knows how that's going to impact the rest of the season. As we said, Cowboys get 2 points. That might decide who plays at home in a finals game or seeding or avoiding another strong team. And then on top of that, one thing we didn't mention in the recap, Val Holmes was technically offside when he took the kickoff. He planted his foot in front of the line. So in addition to getting the call wrong, which we all agree, the bunker missed the opportunity to just nip it in the bud and call Holmes offside, right? And wouldn't have even had to review the contact. Then I listened to the Annesley press conference that he does every week to explain the decisions. He said they were wrong, but he also came up with this thing called a soft whistle and said that the ref blew the whistle softly, which meant that the tackle was complete but didn't mean end of the game. And he needed to say that to justify that it was a stoppage, allowing Cowboys to challenge, but not game over, which you can't challenge after game over, right? But here's the thing I want to end this on, because now the reports are out that West want to, consider legal action to try and overturn the result, and based on the letter of the law. And here's the thing, even if they manage to overturn the result, you're never going to overturn the way that you felt or the way that those players felt that night when they got robbed of that victory. That really hurt them, and that, you're not going to suddenly feel great. It's not like Parramatta can go and launch legal action and say, we want to get awarded the 2007 premiership because Storm were over the cap. But everyone's already celebrated, got their tattoos or whatever. It doesn't, what's the point really? I think there's a silver lining that nobody has mentioned this week with the Tigers, and that is they've had a bad season. They've had disappointing results. They've fired their coach. They've had some embarrassing nights. That bunker blunder had more people talking about West and what a good performance West put up and how West deserved to win over the team coming second than it would have had people talking if they actually won. So if West were in the finals hunt, if the 2 points would be the difference in their season going on or not, that's a different story. Maybe you should push any avenue you can. But I would just say West Tigers, take everyone's sympathy, take the respect, the pats on the back, fight, pick your battles. I wouldn't want to make enemies or piss off the NRL more than you need to. Maybe just let them remember that they've screwed you over on this occasion. At the end of the day, you put up a mighty effort. You did James Tarmow proud in his 300th, to be fair. Now you need to focus on Brisbane. And Brisbane do get back Billy Walters and Dean Mariner as well. The young gun is going to debut at centre, pushing out Brenko Lee, while Cobbo will remain out. West Tigers, as well as losing that game to the Cowboys, lose Luke Garner. I've essentially just said, but honest, get over it to the Tigers. But it's easier said than done. Do you reckon they can? And do you reckon they can replicate that output against that they put out in Townsville against a flying Brisbane?
Yeah, if I did think that they can replicate that performance, I definitely wouldn't be laying the minus 15.5 with the Broncos. But it was such a brutal ending and all the hysteria and media around it. I do think it's going to be hard for the Tigers to focus this week and get over it and put in a similar effort because they really arrowed in on Tarmo's 300th, and you could tell the players are up for it. Dane Laurie had his best game of the season, and everyone was in sync last week for the Tigers. But I think it's going to be a different story this week, and we've seen how historically when you do have a shock loss or a shock ending like that, that it can negatively impact the team the week after. And the last time I remember something like this similar happen, it did happen to the Tigers, and it was last year in round 6, as we all remember, in that golden point game against Souths, where Burgess planted the ball over the try line. They thought he lost it. Luke Brooks runs 100 metres upfield, scores the match-winning try. They rule the Tigers' try, and then the bunker cruelly denies the Tigers' win, and they give Burgess a grounding, and South end up winning 18-14. And what happened the week after? The Tigers were a 6.5-point underdog against Manly at home, and they lost by 40 points. So I definitely feel that something similar could happen here. And we know Brisbane are on a roll. They've got an extended turnaround. They're just in sync right now. And I want to ride this form and uptick, because I did say last week, heading into the Para game in the podcast last week, that I felt that this Brisbane side had much more improvement in them, especially post-Origin with all these players returning. And I definitely thought that that's still the case. And they do have much more talent. And we know Reynolds' kicking game is great, especially over an 80-minute period. So they can keep the pressure on. They've got a relentless go forward. And it does show how highly they do rate this young centre, because Branko Lee has been playing admirably as a replacement for Harvey Farnworth. But the fact that they're willing to drop him, I think it shows the depth that they have coming through the ranks. And I think Walters is picking the side that he thinks has the most points in them. And that's one of the markets that we'd like them to score. So I'd also look at a Brisbane team total if you like them as well. But minus 15.5 is the best way that we found to play this one.
Yeah, Brisbane was willing to play enterprising attacking footy, even when they had a bunch of Origin stars out when they were hosting the Dragons. So now they've got a few of the weapons back. I think it's going to be scary for West, as much as they can try and say, oh, look how hard we played against Cows, let's do the same. It's not that easy to replicate, and they're not going to have it all their own way, that's for sure. This Brisbane side is a force in their own right, and very confident and very dangerous right now, especially at home. And I talked about what a great spot it is with the longer preparation for the home side as well. So not only have we got our best bet, they're going to be the anchor of our mixed matchup, which is Brisbane plus New Zealand to outscore Penrith and Cronulla. So two teams we are backing with in New Zealand and also Brisbane against sides that we are fading this week in Penrith. And look, we think the Bunnies will keep it tight, at least against Cronulla. And we're actually a $2.40 underdog there. You can have a max stake up to 200 on that on Toppy with the promo code TryPod. And we think if it's going to be in the vicinity of us chasing 30-plus points with Brisbane, depending on how the three prior matches have gone. And as you say, we do like Brisbane's opportunity to put on some points. And if we like Brisbane over, that's another variation of kind of playing the Broncos over. And even if we're behind the 8 ball and we need more than 30 points, it's got that type of potential this game where it really could be a blowout, hence our best bet. Moving to Sunday, the Knights host the Dogs. Dogs are 7.5-point road favourites. Ponga out potentially for the season, which brings Hoy back to fullback, where he's filled in a number of times this year. Fitzgibbon is also out. The Dogs get back Avarillo, who had COVID. Tyler Mariner is out with an injury. Waddell suspended, so Tapine comes in to start. Benonis, you lead us off. Any thoughts on this game?
Yeah, this was a pretty dull game for me, and I didn't really have much. I do feel the Knights are going to be better with the ball than what they were last week, because it's pretty hard to scramble mid-game when you do have an injury. But now they've got a full week to prep with Tex Hoy at fullback, knowing Ponga's going to be out. They're also missing Fitzgibbon as well, so there's a bit of a reshuffle in their back row rotation. It is hard to imagine the Knights winning this game, though, given that the Dogs are a side that's playing with the confidence, and they have the firepower, and they get a bit stronger this week with Avarillo back from COVID as well. But I just don't see the Dogs being significantly better than this Knights team, even with those outs. So it is hard to lay over a converted try. I probably need a 3.5 or 4 to lay with the Dogs. So I think it's a pass for me, but I definitely can't touch the Knights.
Yeah, I do think the Dogs are the obvious pick. People will play with the line, or they will play them head-to-head in their multis. And look, the thing about Canterbury is they drew a line in the sand. When they brought Potter in, they actually have changed their style of play. They are playing like noticeably better. They've made real strides. Whereas with the Knights, like, what can you really say? They've kind of trudged through this season, and after starting 2-0, ever since their season took a bit of a nosedive, it really has never recovered. And they've had 1 or 2 decent performances, but they've been few and far between. And it's kind of a little bit like the Gold Coast game. I look on paper, I don't think that the home side should be such a big underdog. But it's because you can't really trust them, because they underperform time and time again. And then, you've got to just recognize some players are really flying at this point in the season. Adokar is one, Burton is another, and they're really impressing me. And another player we probably haven't spoken about that's having a really strong year, although he's leaving and will be replaced by Reid Marnie, is Marshall King at hooker there for the Dogs. Could be a handy pickup for the Dolphins for sure, because he's been playing well. And I know Brayley's returned for the Knights. But in saying all that, even though I feel like the line is steep, I would still lean to Canterbury. I just don't want to have my money on the Knights when I don't trust that they're going to fight for 80 minutes for me. Finally, the Dragons, Cowboys, and St George are at home, but the Cowboys are the 7.5-point road favourite. And we're going to play the second half line minus $3.5, $1.85 on Ladbrokes and Neds. with North Queensland. Again, just to share a little bit of top 8 context. As I said, I was playing with Ladder Predictor. St George are 10th, but they're equal with points on the three teams above them. And certainly getting that win last week keeps them in the hunt, no pun intended. And the thing is with St George, though, they have a poor points differential too, so they're probably going to need at least 4, maybe 5 wins of their final 6. And when I look at their schedule, they'll probably be favourites twice. So clearly they're going to need to pull some upsets along the way. And if they're going to pull an upset this week, it'll be without Cody Ramsey. Mbai has been named at fullback with Sloan on the bench. Slightly curiously, the Cowboys might have Ruben Cotter back. He is in the reserves, but Payton did say in his press conference that Cotter would be back this week. Having said that, does he play sparingly on the return? We'll wait and see. Lucky win theory. We just talked about how we're going to go against the Tigers and how you work so hard and you get so close, but you fall short. It's very hard. It's deflating to just want to do all the hard work and all the preparation again. And sometimes teams that get so close but cruelly lose have a flat spot the next week. Lucky win theory is kind of the opposite. It's like a springboard. It's like where a team wins a game they probably shouldn't have and gets a confidence boost that we won and we get the energy from that. But at the same time, we can search for improvements because we know full well we easily could have lost. So would you agree that kind of applies perfectly to North Queensland this week, Adonis?
I do think that applies. I don't feel that they needed a springboard because of how great they've gone this year, but I just feel more if it's like a reset in their season now that they've had all their plays back from Origin. It was a bit of a wake-up call for them. So it's going to ensure that they are switched on and focused because they definitely do have aspirations of finishing in that top 2, and they do want to cement their places as definitely getting that home edge in that battle of the top 4 there. So you touched on Ben Hunt earlier, and he's single-handedly kept the Dragons in this finals race, given how good his form's been this year, and fully respect him and what he's done. But I just feel that this week's going to be a step too far for them, and their best ball runner and support player as well in Ramsey is out. He got injured in that first half against Manly. And I think that last week's conditions just masked how important and how good he's been going because they had a lead. They jumped out to a 12-0 lead and they had the luxury of playing weather footy and just keeping it in the forwards and a grinding style of game. But I really think that his impact's going to be felt this week because I don't think Mbai offers as much with the ball at the back, and they're not going to have it all their own way this time around. And I understand they have a longer prep, but I just think the Cows are coming into this the much better unit. We know how fit and dominant they've been in second halves, which is why we like the second half line. And I think once that energy initial burst from the crowd wears off, I just think that the Cows are going to have way too much firepower. And even with Cotter ruled out, assuming he's ruled out, I'd have this line over 8.5. So I definitely think that it's a bit too low. So I like to play with the Cows.
Yeah, I do feel like anything they get from Ruben Cotter in the event that he plays is a bonus, and I would like to bet regardless as well. And let's say it how it is too. We are big St. George fans. We've backed them very rarely this season. We tend to have gone against them. What can we say? We watch the games every week. And although Ben Hunt could very well win the Dally M, just not a side that you always feel greatly confident about having your money on. So therefore, not afraid to go against them here. And I mean, we took St. George against the Cowboys up in Townsville, but I liked the Dragons a lot better that given week. And I think that the Cowboys are going to pose more problems for them, as you've suggested as well. Let's not forget too, the Dragons won last week, but Manly lost 3 starting forwards to COVID in the days leading up. So that certainly played a part. I also don't really downgrade North Queensland for underperforming last week. You can argue that they were 20-point favourites and they were nearly beaten. So should we downgrade our power rating of North Queensland? But it happens week to week. You get a little complacency creeps in. Certainly Cowboys had a lot of first half errors. And I also just want to give a lot of the credit to West for how good they played on the day. So I think Cowboys getting that scare, getting the 2 points, which are pretty golden, and having that opportunity to finish top 2, avoid Penrith potentially, not travel to Sydney before a grand final if nobody can beat the Cows at home. That's what they've got in front of them. I reckon that the Cowboys will be locked in, so it's a good week to play them and lay the points. I didn't mention too, that's the jersey giveaway game also, so comment who you think will score the last try and the minute you think they'll score. I have to add a disclaimer. Jerseys only, if you live in Australia and New Zealand. And I give a shout out to Dave, who follows us from all the way in Canada, and we will sort him out. But we didn't even think of an international disclaimer that we might have to apply for future prize giveaways. As much as we love the people that follow us from all around the world, that's amazing. And I hope you guys have enjoyed the show tonight, a bigger one. Just felt like so much to cover. 5 best bets, as we said. Let us know what you think of our best bets, as well as what you might be backing yourself. Hit us up in the comments. Best of luck with any punts you're going to have the upcoming weekend. Always do it responsibly. We will catch you Sunday for the recap. Thanks for tonight, Adonis. And Lego.